Welcome. Everybody is coming in. So glad to see you. If you can find the chat, if you don't mind, in the chat, go ahead and put your name and where you are from. Tell us what county that you're from. So your name and your county. If you also want to tell us what the weather is like there where you're coming from. So right now it's a little overcast here. We were promised some terrible storms that we kind of missed last night. So just go ahead and put in your name and your what county you're from, and then what kind of weather that you're experiencing. So hopefully, can folks see what's in the chat? I don't know if you can, but hopefully you can. Give me a thumbs up if you can see other folks responding in the chat. That would be great. Thank you so much. It's always so good to go through this exercise because I love the fact that we're seeing people from all over. We've got people from Fayette County and McCracken County and Laurel County. There's Wolfe County on here. Hello, Jay McCoy. I see you in the chat. Logan County. I love that. Jefferson County, Owsley County, Graves County, all over the state. So thank you guys for that. Somebody is commenting that there is an echo. Don't know if anyone else is hearing the echo or not. I can't hear anything on my side. I apologize for that. Uh-oh, Crystal Cox says there's an echo. Sure. What's happening there? I apologize. So welcome here. Glad that you guys are with us. We are Grant Ready, Kentucky, and we are so pleased and thrilled to partner and host the Cabinet for Economic Development, who is going to be sharing with us today what the grant program is doing a little different in over these next couple of years. Thankfully, thumbs up, it has been renewed for the next 2 years, $50 million in each year, not to steal any of Joseph's thunder. But we are so very excited about that and so glad that this program is still around to meet the needs of communities that can't always come up with cash for grants. And so, but there are a few changes. And so we thought that it might be good if we worked with the cabinet to be able to offer this webinar to just kind of bring people up to speed on the changes. Maybe even there might be a few changes to the actually application. So we just want to make sure everybody is on the same page with that. So Joseph, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Looks like we have about 107 folks on the call right now. I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to you, but I'm here for any questions that you have. Just a little bit of the flow. Joseph's going to give his presentation. And then we actually have some folks on the call who are going to share their experiences with their community through the grant program and what has happened and what they've seen. So we have Kathy May from Campton and Wolfe County, and then we have Ruthie Caldwell. Many of you know her. She's actually from all over the state. She comes to us from Eastern Kentucky, but she helps people all over the state be able to access these funds. And so they're going to be telling a little bit about their experiences, and we may have a couple of others that may join us as well. So I think I see Angie Hall on the call, and Angie Hall is with the Perry County Fiscal Court, and she's going to be talking about her experience with accessing these funds. And then Valerie Horn is going to be sharing a little bit with us too, also from the Wattsburg area and what this program has meant. So Joseph, we'll turn it over to you, but we will hold our questions and answers till the end. So feel free to put them in the chat. That's no problem, but we will not answer questions and answers until the very end. So Joseph, go ahead.
Thank you, Melissa, and I'm excited to talk about this program and the updates. Really excited that it was able to secure additional funding over the next 2 fiscal years. Yes, that is part of the presentation. You did beat me to it a little bit, but that's perfect. It's good to repeat it, say it as many times as possible. to get the message across. For a little bit, because we've got so many people in attendance, I will actually talk about the program sort of at a fundamental level too, and just highlight some things that are different in case someone new is attending. This is the first time they're really learning about the grant program. Uh, the Government Resources Accelerating Needed Transformation Program, or what I will continue to refer to as the grant program, uh, is designed to help assist eligible applicants secure the required match funding for eligible federal grants. I talk about this program a lot. It's a program that I'm really excited about generally. I do travel a lot with Grant Ready Kentucky and do some presentations at their trainings. They're kind enough to have me at those presentations instead of doing their own presentation for it, which could be better than mine. But the first thing I want to talk about is the program itself. I've kind of laid that foundation, but we're going to talk a little bit more about just the background that leads up into the 2026 regular session on a subsequent slide. If this is the first time you're hearing about it, you might have heard about it in its initial pilot iteration from 2023, where it was administered by the Department for Local Government and given an allotment of $2 million. Then in 2024, it was moved to the Cabinet for Economic Development and given an allotment of $200 million to help secure these federal grants for eligible applicants. And then in 2026, the program, through its immense success over the past 2 years, had actually obligated the entirety of that $200 million for the purposes of helping eligible applicants, communities, nonprofits be competitive and secure those federal grants at a national level. And due to that success, it was time to reconsider what the program would look like. And then an additional $100 million was appropriated across 2 fiscal years as a result of that legislative session. Now, the way that's broken down is that it's 50 million each fiscal year. So, for those of you who have already applied for the July meeting, for example, you know we had to wait until July because the funds did not become available until the new fiscal year. As a result, the first 50 million has been appropriated to the program, and the additional 50 million will be in July of 2028. All right. So, for those of you familiar with the program, this section has not changed. If this is maybe the first time or a good refresher for you for the program, this is a very helpful and it's an exciting program. It's a great sandbox, but you got to get into the sandbox first. So, there are a few key parameters to think about if you're considering the program, and these, for the most part, have not changed, but just to highlight them all the same. So, to be able to apply to the grant program, you must be a city government, a county government, a 501c3 organization. Now, that is specific. It is 501c3 specific in legislation. So, a nonprofit of a different status or a different organization style would not count. It does need to be 501c3 nonprofit to be eligible for the program. A subdivision of a city or county, so think of like a subdivision for like wastewater or something like that, or any entity organized in Kentucky providing public services through that following list right there. So, for example, law enforcement and fire and emergency medical, things of that nature. They don't really fall into the category of city or county. They have their own organization. And so the legislator added that separate caveat to be an eligible applicant for the program through those avenues as well. So to note, to be eligible for the program, you need to be one of these particular entities who is the applicant to our program. But it also must be in support of an eligible federal grant. So an eligible applicant fits that criteria previously mentioned, and that applicant is seeking to secure federal funding through a federal grant sponsored by any of the following agencies. Uh, this list here has changed. This is one of the bigger changes in terms of expansion of opportunity here for the grant program. The list
Joseph,
here,
I
yes.
am so sorry. Would you mind sharing your slides with us?
Are we not seeing the slides?
I am not seeing the slides currently.
Great.
I'm
Okay.
seeing them.
Oh, you're seeing them? Okay. Well, just kidding then. We are good.
We're seeing them
All
on
right.
our end too, so we're good.
All right. Well, great. All right. So program eligibility for the federal grant, we have this list here. We have some expansions that have made a difference into the who can apply for the program based on their federal grants. A key takeaway from this, just generally, is that if the organization you are applying to at the federal level rolls up into one of these organizations, it counts. A premier example that comes up a lot is the Department of Interior, which is on a following slide. But the National Park Service is a part of the Department of Interior, and National Park Service has a lot of federal grants. People who apply to those grants are able to apply to this program because it rolls up into an eligible entity. Another popular one, for example, is the Department of Homeland Security, which administers the FEMA grants that many communities have taken advantage of in the past year or so. Um, this list here, most of this is unchanged, but I want to point out two that are different. The United States Department of Defense has been added, so federal grants targeted from the Department of Defense or roll up into the Department of Defense are eligible. The U.S. Department of Justice has also been added, so federal grants that roll up into those two departments are now eligible for the grant program. No entity was removed from this list, just an expansion on those. So if you had a program that you already knew counted towards the incentive, possibly, then it still can here as well. The last list there, those 12 agencies, this is that list here. Our most popular options from this list, of course, include the Appalachian Regional Commission, is a big opportunity here in the state if you're able to apply for those. But anything that rolls up into any of these categories will count as well. All right, so that first box, eligible entity, we've worked through that. The next one being an eligible federal grant. So then finally, one thing that I've mentioned at the beginning, but is something to keep in mind, is that we can only support federal grants that have a requirement for local match. That's most federal grants, but it does need to explicitly state that they are required to be matching funds. So cost share, things like that, where they can only support 75% of a total project. That means you've got to come up with the other 25%. That would be an example of things requiring match. And that ties in directly to what we're able to support. So the maximum at which the grant program can support any one application, which are all tied to singular federal grants, is up to that required local match by the federal grant. One exception would be the Delta Regional Authority. For those of you familiar with their federal grants, it appears that many of them, despite saying it makes them more competitive to have match, doesn't actually say it's required, which prior in 2024, that meant that they were not eligible. In 2025, the legislator made a special note explicitly stating that Delta Regional Authority projects that require matched through making them more competitive would count towards this program. It's a small caveat and it only applies to the DRA, but just in case that applies to you, that's something important to think about. This next one is one of the largest changes to the program, and so I'll want to make special emphasis of this one. It used to be that the grant program could accept applications within 1 year, 12 months, look forward, look back of a submission or of an expected award date for a federal grant. This provided a lot of flexibility for timing. It helped compensate for that gap in time, switching from Department of Local Government to the Cabinet for Economic Development, and it let us get into the groove of how the program worked. Out of the 2026 legislative session, a new change has been made that grant, as in government resources accelerating needed transformation applications, need to be submitted to us within 90 days of a submitted application to the federal grant. So that's a bit of a difference. Prior it was expected award decision. Now it's when you submit that paperwork, you have within 90 days, one way or another, to secure the grant program application to try and get funding supporting that federal grant. So 90 days, look forwards, look backwards, for submitting your application to the federal grant. So that's one of the biggest ones. Just keep that one in mind and know that that's probably one of the largest changes of the program as far as mechanics are concerned. Another caveat, one that doesn't come up very much, is that it must be an eligible project. And so what do I mean that that doesn't come up very much? The sandbox has mostly been, we've made it into it. We're able to have a lot of great opportunities and a lot of chances to make projects happen in places they otherwise wouldn't be able to. One thing that isn't a requirement is that it be an eligible project, which must mean it is either publicly owned property to be acquired for public ownership, or private property in the public interest and for a public purpose that benefits the community. I say this doesn't come up very much because the required applicants are always performing in this way. City counties, it's often work done on public land or for public purpose, and for nonprofits, just inherently as you have structured your organization as a 501c3, that private property you are working on has a public purpose, a public interest for community benefit. I don't really see too many applications. Actually, I don't think I've ever seen one come through that doesn't meet this criteria. I think a lot of people who are interested in applying for this program fit into those categories very nicely. All right, another big change to the program, the local match requirement. So the terminology here gets a little confusing. It does for me all the time. I trip myself up, I think more often than applicants do. But the federal grant that you are applying for that requires match. So say it's a federal grant that needs you to put 20% into the project. You're looking to us to try and fill that 20%. On top of that 20% asked from us, or whatever that percentage may be, the applicant is also required to have some funding committed to the project in terms of outside of the federal grant. So in this case, that change is now 2 to 10% of the grant program funds. That's determined by population, not by any other factors. It's a ranking of or 5 different categories. So there's 5 different tiers for population. It's 2%, 4%, 6%, 8%, 10% respectively. That map is on our website. And it also calculates automatically into the application itself as to what that match requirement would be. If it is a regional project, those percentages are still average, just like they were in the past. Prior, it was a 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, or 5% match. All those numbers have doubled. It's 2%, 4%, 6%, 8%, and 10% respectively. Again, never exceeding 10% of the grant program funds that are being requested because of the way that the averages would work out, but it could be somewhere in between those numbers if you have a regional project. There's still a scoring requirement. It's all still based on return on investment, relative positive impact, and those help determine whether or not the project meets those minimum thresholds for eligibility for the program. The floor for that is 60 currently. A lot of projects, I think, have no issue coming up with the return on investment or the relative positive impact component. And to date, I haven't seen too many projects meet below that scoring threshold as it is right now. All right, the process itself. There's going to be a small adjustment that occurred actually in October of last year, just sort of a framing reference difference that I also wanted to talk about a little bit here. Everything else, though, maintains largely the same from the iteration of the program that occurred before we paused at the end of the March meeting, and so heading into April. Application submissions are still due by the first of each month. They should still be emailed to the ced.grant2024@ky.gov. That's still where we're going to process those applications, still going to receive them and have maybe some initial contact. Our team will still go through and review, score, and rank these projects. If you've ever worked with us before, you know that we reach out a lot and just say, hey, we have some clarifying questions about this, just to make sure we have everything ready for the meeting that occurs at the end of the month for each application cycle. So each month we still meet with the cabinet secretary here to approve projects that we have presented, and we want to make sure we've got all the information necessary, which is why I reach out in between the first and that meeting time. Finally, after that meeting, there's a notification of decision and an award letter or some type of email to confirm, hey, congratulations, these fundings are obligated. A key distinction here is that previously we would often go immediately into drafting a grant agreement, which is a legal document that allows us to actually facilitate the transfer of funds in the event that you receive the federal award. This whole program is contingent upon the federal award being captured as a result of this applicant applying to the federal government for the applicant or for the grant and then using our funds to secure that grant. Once you receive federal award now, you let us know, and that's when we draft up the grant agreement. We've seen a lot of projects change in their time, sort of in the federal queue, or something comes back and the amount has been adjusted in some way. This allows us to work with things in the most recent version of that application and ensure that the grant agreement reflects the most recent version of the project. So that's a slight difference from maybe anything prior to October 2025. Not a statute thing, just a policy thing, a procedure that makes it easier for us to administer the most up-to-date version of those projects. And then finally, the actual exciting part about this program is that it is not reimbursement. It is disbursement based. And so when you receive that federal reward and you let us know that you've gotten it, we draft up that grant agreement. And then once all that's figured out, you can request the disbursement for the entirety of the amount that you were awarded based on our program once we have the confirmation that you received the federal approval. So it's not reimbursement based. I know a lot of federal grants are reimbursement based, but this objective of this program is to ensure your project is able to get started and get moving. You've got the match funding for funds that otherwise you might not have been able to secure or would have had to do things that were different than just working through another program. But now you can use those funds right at the onset to actually get your project off the ground and work towards whether that be reimbursement benchmarks or phases that you need to hit on a certain timeline. So that part of the process hasn't changed, and that's still a really exciting part of the program. Uh, our website has the most recent materials, so it's got that new map that I was talking about that shows the counties and the breakdown of population. It's also got information, our most recent fact sheet, and it also has our application itself. So you can find that on the website as well. If you just were to look up, say, Cabinet for Economic Development grant program, you would also find this website if you're not able to get that down quickly enough. It should be pretty accessible. And if not, of course, you can always reach out to me if you want a direct application or have any other questions about that part of our program. This is a quick map. I've left out some of the statistics that I normally include for this presentation, just in the interest of both time and to allow for what that looks like maybe after the first month of the new iteration of the program. But you can see the impact that this program has had across the state. 109 counties impacted by projects for the grant program. You see some of our heavy hitters where the most activity is taking place, Jefferson County and Perry County. Real wonderful usage of the program across the state. But if you're one of those 11 counties, if you see your county kind of grayed out, please reach out. We'd love to have this be 120 counties. We know that each county can benefit from this program. So anytime you see yourself on there, or you maybe you know someone who is over there who's trying to do some project, let them know about this program. And let them know to talk to Grant Ready Kentucky, let them know to talk to us so we can figure out the best next steps for them and see if there's a way that this program can benefit the entirety of the state in that way. General next steps for this program has remained the same, of course. You could still probably access the website from this old link. I think at some point this link will die though. So this is just a reminder like, hey, that previous link should work. This one, I think at some point they're going to cycle it out. But the application deadline is still the same, first of each month, submitted to the ced.grant2024@ky.gov email address. And from there, I will sort through them and assign them out to the rest of the team, and we'll begin to work on those projects. If you have other specific questions, the area development districts are also involved in this program, along with Grant Ready Kentucky. Be sure to reach out. The federal experts are these people. I am sometimes feeling like I'm discovering new federal grants each month, which is really exciting to see that Kentucky is taking advantage of so many different opportunities. But the real experts on federal grants themselves are certainly going to be Grant Ready Kentucky and the area development districts themselves. As a quick reference, here's some information here about the actual breakdown for the area development districts in case you're not familiar with who your point of contact should be for those particular regions. And complete applications, again, should be submitted to the ced.grant2024@ky.gov email address. And that is it for my presentation today. Just about the overview of not only what has changed, but just some fundamentals about the program in case some of those thoughts were a little rusty from last time. Maybe you heard us talk about it.
Thank you. So once again, and Joseph, they are blowing up the questions. So we're going to have lots of questions for you here in just a moment, and maybe even after we hear from some of our folks that are going to be talking about their experience with the grant program, there may be others. So we will circle back around to those questions. But what we'd like to do now is kind of switch over to our folks that have agreed to kind of share their experiences with the grant program. And I'm going to try to go alphabetically. And so Ruthie Caldwell, your last name starts with a C, so you're going to be first up. And so Ruthie, if you wouldn't mind to share with us. Now, Ruthie works with organizations all over the state of Kentucky. She she lives and resides in Floyd County in Eastern Kentucky, but she serves and helps all over the state. So Ruthie, and let's try to limit this to about 5 minutes for each person. But Ruthie, if you want to just share some of your experience and the benefits that you have seen directly from the grant program, I think this helps people maybe begin to see themselves in some of their projects. And so just share a little bit of that experience.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So, yeah, I own my own grant writing and project management business called Vision Granted, and I'm one of the coaches for Grant Ready Kentucky. So, I've helped about a dozen organizations submit these grant applications. So, I've kind of figured out some of the things to watch out for, and I wanted to share some of those things with you guys. But I have just noticed this has been such a game changer for so many organizations. I am so grateful that this exists because match has always been an issue for disadvantaged local governments and nonprofits. And the fact that you can get the money up front to be able to move things forward has been amazing. So many nonprofits and local governments, if they finally get a big grant, they'll have to take out a line of credit or a loan to get it started. And so this is really helping move things forward. So Joseph, I'm so happy you guys are doing this. So I wanted to share a tracker that I created this just to help whenever I'm working on one of these because it just keeps everything organized. And Grant Ready Kentucky can share this with you guys. Just make sure to always read the grant guidance and make sure because things might change. It might be different, but this has been really helpful for me to track all the documents and things that you need to do and how to apply and all those things. So basically, this is just a way to track the different like page limits. For instance, the letter from the applicant has to be 1 page. You can change whether you've started it or whether it's for review or who's going to be working on it. It just has some notes about like how to actually submit it. And then we also have a place for the letters. So this way you can track which letters you need, who you're contacting, which ones you've received, and special notes. And then there's also a tab for team contacts of like who you might want to contact for different things. I've just found this has been really helpful to organize to get this submitted quickly. Some of the things that I've noticed with these is that it can be a little tricky when you're calculating the match. Sometimes I'll spend like 15 to 30 minutes helping people just try to figure out exactly how much the local match is going to be once you get all of the counties and the region in there that you're actually going to be serving. So just be prepared that it is a little tricky with the math. You're not stupid. It's not like there's nothing wrong with the application. It just takes a little bit of time to figure out how much you have to have locally versus how much the grant you can request from the grant program. And then the other thing is just make sure to start gathering your letters of endorsement as soon as you can, because getting a letter from a mayor or a county judge can take a while. And so I found it's helpful sometimes to send a template and a little description of what the product is about to the judge executive's office so that they know why they want to even endorse it. So explaining a little project summary, maybe a paragraph about it, some of the impacts it's going to have on their county, who you are, who's applying, how much you're asking for, just a very basic summary of the grant, and then like a little template of what they might want to put in a letter. That can be very helpful for them, and then a date that you need it by to be able to apply. Yeah, so those are just some of the things that I found to be helpful and some of the things that are a little sticky that make it hard to submit. So does anyone have any questions?
Well, just a follow-up comment, just in case there's folks on the call that don't realize, because Joseph was really focusing on changes, is a couple of iterations, or I guess an iteration back, used to, if you were serving 30 counties, you had to get 30 letters from your cities or counties to endorse your project. And then the legislation changed. Joseph, please throw something at me if I'm wrong. But then it became to at least 50% or more than 50%. So again, if you were serving 30 counties, then you had to get 15 letters to be able to endorse your project. So that's what Ruthie is talking about, being able to try to track that in case you didn't know. If you're serving just one county, you just have to get your county. But those of us that might be serving regional projects that include multiple counties, you need to know that you've got to dig in and be ready to pull out all those letters. So, but I'm glad that the legislation has given us a little bit of flexibility in being able to just get 50% of the letters rather than all of them. So Thank you for that, Ruthie. Again, going alphabetically, Angie Hall, you're up next, and Angie is the grant professional for Perry County Fiscal Court. And so, Angie, why don't you tell us about your experience and any kind of struggles that you may have seen or benefits that you may have seen with the grant program?
Well, to reiterate what Ruthie said, it has been a game changer for Perry County and the city of Hazard. I actually write and administer grants for both the city and the county. We're fortunate here that we have a city and county that work really well together, and these grant funds, these match dollars have been an absolute game changer. As you've seen from the map, we have currently 42 grant applications that have been approved and applied for. And so we have the Buckhorn, we have a project, the Buckhorn Transmission Waterline Project. It's a $19 million project. And we have several funding agencies involved in that project, one of which came to the table with $10.6 million requiring a 20% match. Had we not been able to tap into these state grant match funds, that project, with the county, Perry County suffering not only from one, but two major recent flood disasters, our budget would not have allowed us to be able to fund that match dollars. And so it's been an absolute game changer. And when you look at those 42 projects that is happening in Perry County, in and around Perry County, just think of the scope of that magnitude. We would not be able to do all of those. Those are anything from water and sewer infrastructure, tourism, economic development projects. So a wide range. Even we got some park projects in those funding pots. And so that's a lot of projects that are actually taking place and occurring in Perry County that we would not been able to do a lot of them, most of them, had we not been able to tap into these state grant match dollars. Are there some hiccups we've had along the way with the application process? Yes, and we're still having little hiccups occasionally with the process, and now that they have thrown in this 90-day window on the application, throws in another one that we need to talk about and discuss. But most of them we can work through with the Cabinet for Economic Development and get through those hurdles. But it definitely has been a game changer for our programs and our.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you so much. And I live in Perry County, and so I'm getting to see all this fabulous work happen around my community. And again, thank you to the grant program for making that possible, because it would not be otherwise. So just really appreciate that. Okay, next up on the list is Valerie Horn. She is with the Cowan Community Center and other organizations that she does to support Whitesburg and Letcher County. And Valerie, I'd love to hear from you, your experience with the grant program, and kind of what has been your strategy to kind of best approach it.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here, and congratulations to Perry County and their success there with that. I think I could say what's unique here is I represent a sort of small community center. And to recognize and show that this is a resource that is available at varying levels and for varying organizations and varying projects. Some of ours have been, as low as $30,000, which is not a low number, but it's there. And one saying I've thought about with this before, some of you may be familiar, is if it costs $10 to cross the street and get $20, sometimes you can't do it, is an expression that we've heard here in the mountains before. And that has been a deal breaker before in applying for grants is, oh, we can't do that one. It has to have a match. Oh, we can't figure that one out. And it's nice that it's also a cash match. In kind has value and is important and has a place, but dollars are wonderful to go into a program to help versus all the time and tracking the in-kind hours that come with that. And I know there are ways to do that, and we do that, but it's really nice when a project begins with enough dollars to start with. We got introduced to this program through Kentucky River Area Development District 2 with a ARC grant. It's in partnership with some other work in the city. I'd say of the 14 or 15 grants that Letcher County has, we've been involved with 4 or 5 of them successfully, and probably just as many that were not successful. And I also appreciate like getting to see Joseph. If I have a question from which line do I put this on? Or what date is this? Or can you send me that file that you sent me 3 months ago again? I get a prompt and friendly response back with that. So all the things that Ruthie said were true and very good technical advice for you. I think I'm just going to be the spokesperson that says, yes, don't feel like this isn't for you. Don't feel like it's also, it's, I know there are hiccups and we do even have some help with getting through this, but it's a 1-page, a pretty simple grant that goes in behind the others. And I'll shout out to our judge and our mayor and the people that we work with. Letters of support come easily. And and I think they know this program, they know the value of it. So they don't hesitate to sign off on it and make it happen. One of the things I love is, I feel like the work, you don't have to sell the idea and the grant again. This assumes and trusts if your proposal was federally funded, then we support that. They don't have to know every detail of it. I've already learned things that I didn't know. Like, I think it's a wonderful addition that you're including competitive to make a competitive edge versus a requirement for the grant. So I appreciate knowing that. But basically, I'm just just a supporter, and we have been very, very fortunate for it to have added to our opportunities here.
Thank you, Valerie. And I do think that Valerie's organization is a great reminder that it's not always, like Angie mentioned, a 17, $19 million project. It doesn't always have to be a large project to be beneficial to a community. And so, Valerie, thank you for bringing that to our attention. So last, as far as their experiences, is Kathy May with the city of Campton and Wolfe County. And just really appreciate, we did actually a success story on them, how they took a little bit of money and turned it into a whole lot of money because of the grant program. And so, Kathy, why don't you tell us about your experiences with the grant program and how you've kind of maneuvered the process?
Thank you, Melissa, and thanks everyone for inviting me to actually be able to speak today on our experiences. Campton is a very small town, but we do not have a county water board, so therefore we do supply water for all of Wolfe County. So we do have a very large infrastructure that we have to maintain and obviously upgrade. And Campton could not do that without federal funds. So any project that we do have to seek federal funding. And obviously, we could not meet the match money if we had to do that on any of these projects without taking out a loan, which once again would be a huge burden on our small town. I'm very fortunate to work with our ad department. Our Kentucky River ad has been amazing. They always help us find the funding. They are the ones that actually introduced us to this grant program. I did have the pleasure of working with Miss Angie when I was first on board when she was with the ad department. So hello, Angie. Always good to see you. But we have a great ad department, like I said, and they are the ones that introduced us to the grant program. And we currently have 4 pretty large projects that we are able to fund fully with the grant program. One of those being our water treatment plant improvement project, which we just put out to bid and are just getting it off the ground. But our water treatment plant is approaching 14, 15 years of being online. It's a membrane plant. All of those membranes, it's time for those to be replaced, along with a lot of other things. So, that's a very large project that this grant program has helped us to get funding completed for so we can get this started.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much, Kathy, for that and for sharing your experience. At this point, we have about 20 minutes left. Is that right? Do we have 20 minutes? No, we've got longer than that, don't we? How much longer do we have, Eleanor?
This is scheduled to end at 2:30, I believe.
Okay, so we have lots of questions and answers, or lots of questions. I think we're going to have lots of answers. So I'm going to kind of start first in the chat. There is some questions in the Q&A part. We will get to those, so just be patient with us. So the very first question, well, actually, I have 2 questions of my own to begin with, and I don't think I saw them. Number one, Joseph, what about the money that was obligated in the previous budget year? And like for instance, if I applied for a grant and I asked for grant match, I got the approval for it, but now I don't get the federal grant, right? So I'm not getting the match. So we know that there's going to be some money in the previous budget biennium that will come back into the pot because folks are not going to get the grant that they hoped they would get. What is happening with those funds?
That's a great question. Those funds, thankfully, will continue to exist for the program. This is a pretty statute sort of question. Sometimes they make a new program with new money. In that case, that old money would not qualify for anything because that version of the program would be sunset. But in this case, the additional funding was added to the existing program. So funds currently existing in the program, if they were to be recaptured, in that scenario, like you just said, they would be eligible to be obligated again for future projects under the iteration of the program as it is right now. That's another key distinction. And this is going to answer some of the other questions a little bit later too, I think, or at least help with them. This program continues. It is not a new program. There's not a break point, so to speak. It exists as it is right now, and that is the program. So those new requirements of 90 days or 2 to 10% local match, that is the version of the program that is the only version of the program that is accessible, even with funds from a prior iteration of the program. New obligations would still be subject to that new version of the program.
Okay, thank you for that. And so that means that it's really important to anyone on this call that if your grant is not funded, please let the cabinet know so that those funds can be released. So please let folks know because you yourself may be going back for monies that might now be available because other funds have been released. So please notify the cabinet when you do not get the federal grant you were hoping to get so that those funds can be released. My next question, Joseph, is I heard through the rumor mill, right? So I need for you to correct any and all rumors that when we apply for a project, And lots of big projects require multiple grants.
Hmm.
That maybe we can only apply for the grant match one time for that project. So let's take, for instance, a $10 million project, but I'm going to write, four federal grants, and each one of those requires a cash match. And I need all four of them to get to that $10 million, but all four require a cash match. Can I apply for the grant match four times with each of those grants for that one project?
All right. Unfortunately, with most of these things, I can't just give a yes or no. There's some caveats. Uh, Yes, the project is potentially eligible to be applied for with all four of those federal grants. A key distinction is, like, I would normally just tell people we cannot support the same project more than once. But what I mean by that is we can't support the individual phase of each project more than once. So for in the example you've just provided, let's say it's $10 million and it's four federal grants. To apply for that, all four of those to the grant program, we would need a clear distinction on how those funds are going to be used in different iterations of that project. For example, this is a little bit more like city or county sort of minded in this example, but if someone's trying to develop their water system and they've got, they need to change out pipes and they also need to change out the membranes, those could be two different things. It's to you it's the same project because to you it's all working towards the same bigger goal, but to us, it would be two distinct projects. One of them is changing out pipes, the other one is changing out the facility at which the water is processed. Um, if, for example, you were applying for two federal grants that were supporting the exact same part of that pipe project, we would have to pick one. So I think that for the most part, it's easy to find the lines in those projects because each federal grant, I mean, say four of them, presumably they could even be from four different agencies. And that would mean that each of those agencies has a different target. And so therefore you're using those fundings for working capital or you're using those fundings for materials, and whatever that may look like. But we would need some clear distinctions articulated in that letter to help us say, hey, this is working towards the same goal as some of those other projects, but this is a truly distinct project.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for that. Okay, now the questions. Someone asks, are nonprofit keyword, educational 501c3 organizations eligible? So it is a nonprofit 501c3, but it's focused on education. Is that eligible?
Yes.
Okay, great. Next question. I think we clarified this about DRA. I think you actually had that on your slide, so I'm going to skip over that one. What about projects? And I think you've answered it, but I'm going to restate it anyhow. What about projects that have been waiting for the grant application to open and are now outside of the 90-day window?
All right. This is a difficult question, and primarily it's an unfortunate answer. That's twofold, and I'll talk about this. One, in the strictest sense of it, is that the program was paused because we had obligated all funding. We weren't going to approve projects for funding that we didn't have. I mean, it's irresponsible at some level to provide someone a false level of hope, and it's irresponsible for how we manage the program to over obligate funding that was generously gifted for this program. And so a lot of our hands were tied between the months of April to now July, I know that's a huge problem. I have spoken with many people who have had this issue specifically. Um, if they are outside of the 90-day window as a result of there being a pause, and now there's a change where in some cases that could be in excess of those 90 days, unfortunately, that project is not eligible for the grant program. That's where I'll leave it for that. Now, the caveat is that we've got a surprising amount of discretion when it comes to constituting a federal grant application. As many of you know, because you have applied for federal grants, I'll use ARC as an example. ARC, at least at the surface level, has two applications. The first goes to DLG here in the state, is reviewed by DLG, and is spoken with the governor. After you make it past that phase and the governor recommends the project, there's an additional application you submit to finally go to the federal level. That's two applications. Either of those applications would count towards the 90 days. we have just spoken with someone. I have spoken with someone today, and if you're on this call, hey. But they had a conversation where they were awarded a project, or they had initially submitted the application functionally 13 months ago. But as we all know, things have taken a long time at the federal level for grants these days. Uh, and they had just submitted final review paperwork, like the final part of their package, to the federal agency in June of this year. I'm constituting that as an application. That's the final review. They are having to be, they could be turned away at this point. They have not received the federal award, even though their initial application to the federal agency was 13 months ago. They have submitted a supplemental or revised due to pushback or edits from the federal level, and I'm constituting that as a point of application. I'm primarily doing that in this version to try and help as much as I possibly can for projects that are caught in that unfortunate change from 12 months of expected award date to 90 days from application date. That's a huge change. Uh, as time goes on and people are more accustomed to the program, we may have a more defined definition on application. I imagine that'll be challenging given that every federal grant is different. But just know that even if at first onset, if I say 90 days from a point of application and you hear that and go, doesn't work for me, I've now missed my opportunity, don't hesitate to reach out so that we can try and talk about what iterations of the process you have had at the federal grant level. It'll be helpful to me not only for my own knowledge of the federal grants, but it'll also be helpful in cultivating what the response would be on how to implement this in a practical, reasonable manner for a variety of federal grants and applicants who have been caught either in the unfortunate situation of the grant program being a victim of its own success, uh, and also the changing of the statute as a whole. When we get that finalized definition in some way, that would be on a fact sheet or something like that. But just know that right now, there's a lot of discussion about what it means to have a federal application date. And so there's room for there to be a discussion beyond just that first time you submitted. If you had to submit additional materials, you have a second checkpoint of some kind that comes in from a federal level, just reach out.
Well, and that's what I'm hearing, is that we need to just ask Joseph. And so Joseph
Yeah.
is his email is getting ready to blow up, but it does sound like that some of this can be case by case. So
Yes.
let's make sure that we reach out. Okay, next question. This one I think is an easy one. As for agency eligibility, in what category do substance use recovery centers belong? Now, I'm assuming that for the person who typed that in, that they have a 501c3 status. Now, I'm just assuming if you have a 501c3 status, Joseph, they're eligible, right? And
Correct.
so if they are for profit, if they're a for-profit recovery center, they would not qualify. So the only way the
Everything.
substance use recovery center is going to qualify is if it is a 501c3. I don't think that any cities or counties run substance misuse centers, so I'm assuming it would probably either be for profit or 501c3. Now, I see Laura's message in here, and I want to read this in its entirety because I think there could be some misinformation out there. This is such a great opportunity. Thanks for this webinar and the funding potential. However, I am disappointed that the first round of funding is already committed. I was trying to apply this spring to coincide with the EPA grants that I applied for, but I was told that I had to wait for the new requirements to be released on 7/1, and now the funding is already gone. So when can I apply since the first 50 million is already committed? Note, I just learned that our federal grant will be funded. It's a 2-year project beginning October 2026. So this timing is very tricky.
So a multi-part question. First, the 50 million has not been obligated. It's just available to the cabinet to obligate. Our first meeting is this month in July, but I expect us to have additional meetings each month until the funds are obligated. Uh, Obviously, there's some pent-up interest in the program, given that it was on hiatus for a handful of months. So I do expect application volume to be heightened as a result of that. So that's something to keep in mind. As far as the discussion of how that timing would work out for that specific project, again, uh, hearing things like project start in October, yeah, I feel like I would need to know more about the actual, like as I've mentioned, that application date component as well, to figure out when the appropriate time or the earliest it could be applied for in some way. But to reiterate, the 50 million has not been obligated. It, we actually haven't even had our first meeting yet. All 50 million is still currently unobligated. Although, of course, we hope to have successful applications and obligated funds as a result of the meeting that occurs in this July. And of course, all that information continually updated on our website in terms of where the funding is at. And there's a monthly report that we have to submit both to the legislature and to the governor's office that sort of details what occurs at a monthly level, both at the obligation standpoint, but also recaptures and disbursements and things like that to get a feel, you all can get a feel for how the program is progressing through those reports.
I believe this one is easy as well. Someone says that they did not see the Department of the Interior on the list, but it is on the list, right? So it is a
Yes.
qualifying agency.
Yes, and apologies if you couldn't see it on there. It is an eligible federal sponsor. Again, I think someone I spoke to today had a National Park Service grant, which is why that one is the one that came to my mind today.
Very good. And then somebody is saying, where is the map? And I believe that they're talking about the map with the percentages, and that is located on the program web page. And I believe that Eleanor dropped the link to the web page in the chat at 1:21 p.m. And so if everybody wants to go back and find that link, I think you can find it and you'll be able to see the map there.
Yes.
Let's see. Scrolling down through. Is there a maximum number of projects that an organization can request funds for?
There is not a maximum. No, not currently. There is not a maximum for which an organization can apply for or projects in which they can seek support from.
Okay. And someone is asking for Ruthie's checklist. And so, Ruthie, if you will send that to Eleanor, she can send that out with the slides and with the recording. So, yes, you will receive the slides and you will receive the recording from today's webinar. Let's see here. Oh, Chris is commenting on my dogs, by the way. So, yes, thank you so much. They are my spoiled babies. And Valerie has met them in person, so she knows they're too cute. Let's see. Does the match have to be for the full amount of the federal grant, or can it be for the difference we need to make up? And so it's my understanding from the federal grant experience level, in your request, your guidance, it will tell you what your match must be. Now, it could be a calculation because it might, if ARC, you have to look and see how distressed your county is or region is, and that'll tell you if your match is 20% or 30%. But the grant program is addressing that match that is listed in the NOFO. So that's where you're going to look. You're going to look at your request for proposal. How much is the funder requiring in match? And then is the agency eligible? And if it is, then you're going to go to your map and you're going to see how much of a local match you have to come up with as part of that grant match from the grant program. So, Kay, I hope that that's helpful. I'm going to skip over now, and from this point forward, if you think of a question, please put that in the question and answer, because I'm not going to come back to the chat. I'm only going to be looking at the question and answer box now. So the very first question is, what qualifies as a resolution authorizing the submission of the application and the authority to enter into any agreements? So what or who qualifies for that?
Great question. We get this question a lot, actually. We have a sample resolution document on the website as well, because, of course, some entities are just not used to having a sort of formal document that says, yes, I can apply to this program. This entity is willing to enter into an agreement. That would be our grant agreement post-approval for the sake of this program. It's really just a sort of template legal document that just we have on file for when we get audited that says, yes, we didn't force these people to sign a grant agreement. They wanted to sign the grant agreement that incurred them this match funding. So really, it's if you're looking for an example of that, there's a base template available on our website.
Okay, great. Next question. Do the applicants have to have their initial funding in order to apply for the match funding through the grant program? So I'm guessing that they're saying the federal grant that they applied for, do they have to know that they have gotten that grant? And please, it says it's anonymous, so I don't know who typed in this message. If I'm misinterpreting, please clarify. But if you're talking about your federal grant that you applied for, do you have to know whether or not you got that grant first before you apply for the match funding?
Okay. And if we're thinking that that is the federal grant, then no, you would not have to have that. In fact, I find it unlikely that you would be able to, given the 90-day parameter on point of application. If you have a federal grant that approves you in 90 days, let me know. Because that's probably the fastest thing I've ever heard. But no, you do not have to have your initial funding secure for the federal grant. We know a lot of times this match is a requirement even to get that federal grant in the first place. So we're hoping to be helpful on that end in saying that, hey, we've got the match secured. We're a good project. We're a good fit for this federal grant.
The next person. I work for a nonprofit in Louisville. We typically receive a federal grant from the Department of Transportation administered locally by TARP, which is the Transit Authority of River City. I have been told previously that our nonprofit cannot apply for the grant funds for the 20% match because the grant is actually made to TARP by the federal government and then subawarded to us and many, many other nonprofits. Is there a pathway for us to access grant funds? TARP will not apply for the grant program on our behalf. FYI, it was determined earlier by KIPTA that the project itself was eligible, although I do not see the Department of Transportation on the list of eligible entities.
The Department of Transportation is an eligible entity. It is part of that interagency working group that was targeted towards coal and power plant communities, sort of like an umbrella thing that captures a lot of departments. In this case, usually if I see subawardee language that's an instant like, red flag, I'm pretty sure it's not going to work. The times it does work, and so this is an important caveat to think about this maybe for future projects, because it sounds like probably this one is not eligible, is that the subawardee component that you would be talking about is actually the federal government allocating funds to the state governments, and the state governments have a competitive application process by which they select the state recipients of those federal grants. A great example of that is the Community Development Block Grant or various FEMA grants in a similar vein. But in that scenario, Community Development Block Grant is the Department for Local Government. It receives federal funding from the Housing and Urban Development, Department. And then they have a competitive process where they select applicants and we're able to support them that way. Then in this case, if TARC is not going to participate in the grant program as they are the actual recipients, I'm afraid that I think none of those nonprofits who are subawarded would be eligible for that the grant program either.
Thank you. Regarding eligible projects, do grant funds only apply to grants aimed at securing land? And I think that probably came from the slide that you showed about how, you can get land. Or is property more broadly defined? What about grants aimed at providing services? Thank you.
Great point. Yeah, I think that trips a lot of people up. It just has to be, when we talk about property, we really just mean like where it physically is taking place, which oftentimes if it's services, right, it's a like location with your office in some ways where you perform those services. It doesn't actually have to be just about land. It just has to be on property for the purposes of the public or publicly owned. It's really designed to ensure that the grant funding isn't going towards some developer or something like that, where it's like privately owned land with a for-profit purpose. That's pretty much the only safeguard that is targeting towards, when in reality, the eligible entities themselves are kind of the safeguard for that, as that's not how any of those federal grants would be moved in the first place. So in that case,
Okay.
you should be fine.
Very good. And so it's my understanding that programmatic grants are eligible. And then we get
Yes.
back to folks asking about where do the programmatic funds go in the budget as far as how you write that out.
Yes.
And we talked about that kind of goes in like general or operating up at the top,
Yes.
administrative, I think.
Administrative. Yes.
Administrative.
Yes. Administrative. Thank you. I think you prompt me on that one for each of the training sessions because it is very important. Um, And that is it. I think some people also have some hesitancy because they're afraid that it makes their project look less competitive if they have a lot of money in administrative. I feel like I've heard that from maybe different federal grants look at those sort of costs differently. For us, it's not like that. We just need it to be in one of those categories. And if you put a lot of funding in other, we're going to ask you where that other is anyway, and it's okay that it's programmatic costs. We would just put those in administrative.
Very good. As for agent eligibility, we've already covered that. What about projects that have been waiting for the grant application to open? Oh, well, we already answered that one too, about the 90-day window. We have a grant through AmeriCorps, which is an independent federal agency. I'm assuming it would not qualify. And by the way, I know that Joseph doesn't have any ability to add funders to the list, but Joseph, this is one that needs to be added to the list.
Okay, all right.
AmeriCorps,
Yeah.
AmeriCorps is a really great program that enables us to bring in volunteers and folks that kind of work on stipends to do very important work, and it always requires a match. So I don't believe that AmeriCorps, it is a standard, it's the national, Ruthie, what's it called? The National Service for, what's it called?
Center for National Community Service,
That,
CNCS.
yeah. And I think that's where AmeriCorps is listed, and it's not on our agency list. It really hopefully could be added. I agree.
It sounds like a great one to add, but yes, unfortunately, right now it is not.
Is the match monetary and or in kind? And it's cash, right? So they get
That
a
is
cash.
Yes.
If it's a $30,000 match, you're going to get a check for $30,000 less whatever your local match is. If your federal opportunity is approved. So that's great. Can Joseph confirm if it is a regional project and applicants only need support letters for 50% of the counties? I think we just kind of talked about that. And so
Yep.
it is 50%, right? So if for some reason you've got a 30 county project, you need 15 letters from of those 30 counties. You need 15 different counties of the 30 counties.
Yes.
Very good. How are grant funds prioritized? Is it first come, first served?
So eligible projects, if you've participated in the program in the past, as long as we had funding, eligible projects submitted applications, if everything checked out, they checked all those boxes, and we were able to process those applications. We had a relatively high success rate for those applicants to get approval. Sometimes there would be some follow-up questions about, hey, how's this being used or broken down, something we might not have caught. But the prioritization really comes in when we start to see that we are on the horizon of obligating all the funds. And at the point in time of March, for example, when that really was a very important concept, it was relying on the scoring component required by statute. So at that point, when we were running out of funds, we were relying heavily on the scoring component as outlined by statute to discern what we could do in that particular month. But for example, in an iteration where there isn't anything like that, our objective is to have as many projects as possible reach their success level by having this program be involved.
Okay. Somebody asked a question, does an applicant have to have the local match committed before they can apply to the grant program? So if they've got, that 2, 4, 6, 8, or 10% local match, how do they show you that they have that committed? And do they have to at the time they apply for the grant application?
Great question. We do need the funds to be committed or approved for that local match. Typically, we see that included in either a resolution, someone just stating, hey, this money is being committed to this project, or outlined in the letter that they are showing, describing the project, saying, hey, we've got X number of dollars committed to the project for this. All of our applications sort of have a certification that just says everything I'm sort of saying here is true to the best of my knowledge and whatnot, which requires that that statement be sort of verified that way. We're not looking for like a bank account information because we know that sometimes that's going to be scattered or it's going to be from a donor or something like that. But we are looking for that you are committing to that obligation to have those local funds committed to the project.
Right. Someone says their agency receives clients from the entire state, but the majority are from Western Kentucky in the purchase area district. Do we need to get letters from 50% of the state or 50% of the district?
Typically, I tell people since you're working with, target areas, targeted regions, if you're statewide, I don't want to ask anyone to get 60 letters. That's a whole lot. You could instead focus on your physical footprints, get letters of support for those. Or if you have a targeted region, getting letters for those would also work as well. But typically, if you're a statewide entity, but your main footholds are in 4 or 5 counties, I'd say it's more important to have those 4 or 5 counties than it is to have 60 county letters.
Great. Someone asked once again about Ruthie's checklist, and we will send out Ruthie. It's in hot demand. We will send it out with the slides and the recording. Eleanor will send that out. She usually does it the next day. So tomorrow you should get your recording slides and Ruthie's famous checklist. Someone asked, do organizations have to have already been awarded the federal grant before applying for the opportunity? And I think we've said the answer to that is no. That the application, grant program application has to be submitted within 90 days of the federal grant being submitted. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, very good. Let me read this one. I just want to clarify exactly how the grant local matches are calculated because we had issues with the grant application spreadsheet, automatic formulas, not adding up correctly and having to finagle the numbers to balance sources/uses. For example, say we have a project with $1 million in total project cost. We apply for $900,000 from a federal grant, requiring us to provide the remaining $100,000 in match. If our local match is 6%, do we A, figure out the total federal match required, $6,000, or B, base the 6% only on the amount of grant funds requested? And I think it's only on the grant funds. It's 6% of the grant funds.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Not of the total project or the total federal grant, only the grant program funds.
Yes.
Okay. Is the 90 days determined by the application window or by the federal award date or the federal contract date? I think that I understand that there is flexibility there from Joseph's answer. For example, we applied for federal funding in February. We learned that we were tentatively awarded in April, but are currently in the contracting process. The project will tentatively begin in October 2026. So it sounds like, Laura, in this case, you might need to reach out to Joseph directly and just talk to him about the specifics of your project. Would you agree, Joseph?
Yeah. Yes, I would, because even just based off of that, where it seems like the only time there is an application itself submitted is in February, that would be now no longer eligible. But we need to talk about what that contracting process looks like what you've had to submit for that or anything like that.
Initially, we applied for a FEMA PA in 2022 after the December 2021 tornado. My goodness. We just made it to the pending applicant project review for the approval point of this process. Are we able to apply? Or were we required to apply in May of 2022 pending the initial project? So again, it sounds like, I don't have a name on this post, but it sounds like these folks need to contact you directly just to find out so they can share more of the specifics of the project.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Is match funding through the grant program only available for federal grants?
Yes,
And only those federal grants prescribed on the website, right? So there's
correct.
just,
Yes. Yeah.
most are there, but not all. So
Not
you
all.
take a look at that. We have 2 uniquely funded EPA projects that do have the same type of project work. I guess scope is what they're trying to say. Both projects are in Eastern Kentucky. One project is in Wolf and one is in Clay, Leslie, Clay, and Bell. Can we combine these projects for one grant application, or do we need to submit 2 grant applications? That sounds like 2 scopes of work. But is
Yeah.
that under the same, is it under 1 EPA grant or 2 EPA grants? Right? So it
Yeah.
could
Two.
be 1
Yeah.
EPA grant with 2 scopes of work. That would still only be 1 grant application.
That would be one application. But if
Right.
it's 2 EPA grants, then it's 2 applications.
Right. In this iteration of grant, can my organization apply for match even if we're not the prime applicant? Our prime does not want to apply, but the project is large and our subaward will require a large match. We greatly benefit from the match as a subaward on a large project.
Unfortunately, this sounds like a scenario where the person who was initially obligated the federal grant would have to be the one who would be interested in the program. We're not currently able to do subawardees. The only exception to that would be is if it's a multi-state project where the primary is outside of the state. So, for example, if you're doing a project with West Virginia, but West Virginia is the lead, we're able to work with that. But in a scenario where the prime is just another Kentucky entity, that would not work.
Okay, very good. Are federal earmarks eligible? We have a
No.
city that received a federal earmark for emergency command center and they have to provide a match. Okay, no. One more question. I'm sorry, y'all kind of breezed over my question about match requirements. We would prefer that we could use in-kind match for the grant program. We do lots of volunteer events, but we do not get a lot of monetary match. Did you say that the grant match must be monetary? Okay, so this is the local match.
Local
They're
match.
2 to 10%. Does that have to be cash or can that be local? Or can that be in kind? Sorry.
I'm going to say that the answer, it needs to be monetary. Not That's not anything hard and fast. That's just my expectation for when I bring this question up to other people, which I will do because I'm sure that's a common enough question. But my initial response would be that there would need to be something dollar amount committed in terms of something that is monetary in value. But I will have to double check on that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So those were a lot of great questions. Thank you guys so much. We're going to stop with the question and answer portion right now. Except that if anyone has any questions for our panelists who are on here sharing about their projects, to Ruthie or Valerie or Kathy or Angie, if anybody has any questions to them, we only have about 10 minutes left. And once again, as a reminder, you will get the slides, you will get a recording, and you will get Ruthie's famous spreadsheet. So we'll make sure that we get all those to you. So any remaining questions for our panelists? Grant Ready Kentucky can absolutely help you complete your grant application that goes to the state. We can certainly help with that and would be glad to do that. We have a method of coaching that you can go through, and I believe that Eleanor can drop the link to our coaching space on our process. Let's see, is congressionally designated funding issued through USDA application process allowed? I think we already said congressionally designated funding is an appropriation, and that's not included. So we can't include that. So, but we would love to see you in our coaching stream, and Eleanor has dropped that link there. That way we can help you with their project, and we would be happy to do so. We are just thrilled that the cabinet and the legislature and the governor's office have agreed to continue this grant match program. I truly think that this has leveled the playing field for some organizations in Kentucky. And I'm just very thankful for it. So, Joseph, thank you so much for the great work that you do. And if there are no other questions, we will go ahead and stop here. Just really appreciate everybody being on the call, and thank you to our panelists. And oh, let's see, one more. We applied for and were awarded the grant last year. It was to the EDA, and it's still in a wait and see. So this is one of those where we said you might in the past said you might give some extensions if the EDA grant or the federal grant's not been awarded. Is there any changes there?
This is actually, that's a great point. The obligation period has changed for future awarded projects. Currently, that project, if it was awarded last year, has a total of 18 months, and the future projects will have an option for 12 months with a 12-month extension. But the current iteration that I'm assuming that project will be under is 12 months with a 6-month extension, which would mean it would be 18 months total to secure that federal
Again,
funding.
for any additional questions about that project, please reach out to Joseph. So thank you, Joseph. Thank you to everyone who
all.
stayed on the call, and have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.